For a few years, I tried my hand at scrapping in my area for a living, and surprisingly, I did pretty well for myself. Scrap metal was abundant in my town, and people would even offer to pay me to take their dead utilities like washing machines and ovens off their hands, which I would then take to the scrapyard and make a quick little bit of money. Now, a big source of my contacts ended up coming from social media, such as Instagram or Facebook Marketplace, and for the most part, everything went smoothly. But every now and then, I would get a shady seeming opportunity that I would have to think twice about. I'll never forget when I was messaged on Facebook to pick up a broken lawnmower and a torn down shed from a property about an hour away from my house. It was in September of 2017, and I typically didn't pick up scrap after dark because the yard was usually closed by then. But it seemed like this guy had a lot for me to pick up, and he claimed to only be able to meet after he got home from work around 6 p.m. So I figured, why not? What's the worst that could happen, right? The day came that I was supposed to meet him, and I messaged him to confirm that everything was still good to go. And once I got the okay, I hopped into my truck and began making my way to the man's house. There wasn't much traffic, so the drive only took about 45 minutes. But by the time I got to the small, one-lane road where the man lived, the sun had already set. The road was surrounded by thick woods on either side of it, and it almost looked like the guy's house was the only one on the entire road. After driving a bit down the one-lane road, I finally saw a beat-up looking mailbox that had the number 43 on it, which let me know that I had reached my destination. I slowly pulled into the driveway, and the first thing that I noticed was how overgrown the yard looked. From the looks of things, the lawnmower had been broken for some time. As I got closer to the house, I could tell from the dim light shining through the window that the owner was home. I parked my truck, and before I could take my phone out to send the man a message, I noticed someone coming out of the front door. It looked like the guy that I was there to meet, so I shut my truck off and stepped outside. As soon as my foot touched the pavement, I practically jumped out of my skin when I heard what sounded like a very large dog barking. The man came down the stairs and claimed that I didn't have anything to worry about and said the dog was inside. But I still couldn't help but flinch with every step I took, wondering if I was going to be attacked. I did my best to follow the man around as I began gathering all the scrap metal that he had for me. But about halfway through my trips, back and forth from the yard to my truck, I couldn't help but feel like I was hearing the sound of a child screaming underneath the sound of the loud barking. I tried to remain calm as I said my goodbye to the man, and as soon as I hit the road, I pulled my phone out and called my wife to tell her what just happened. She was concerned with what I had heard and said that I should call the police, and I was happy that I did. I informed the officer that I heard a child crying and what sounded like an aggressive animal inside a rundown home. And when they showed up, they ended up finding a small child who did not belong to the owner. It turned out to be a missing child from 2 states away who had been missing for more than 3 weeks at that time. There was also reportedly no dog on site, and the police believe the man was using the recording of a dog barking that was being played over speakers to try to drown out the child for crying for help. When the case went to court, it turned out that the only reason he needed the scrap removed in the first place was that his landlord was going to evict him if he didn't get it out of there.
Alright, so this occurred when I was 16, and because of what happened, I will never use social media again. It was getting near the end of the school year, which meant that we would have the summer off in a couple of weeks. It also meant that teachers would let the class have free time and rarely give out assignments. Anyway, I was in class sitting with my friends chatting as our teacher did give us free time. We were pretty much talking about all the things girls in high school would talk about. What we were doing over the summer, college, jobs, a car, and even graduation. As one of my friends was talking about how her boss just fired her from her job, I got a notification from Facebook on my phone, a username that I have never seen before sent me a friend request. Let me be as clear as I can. Getting friend requests from unknown users is no big surprise to me. What I would do is if I knew the person, I would accept their request and request to be their friend as well, but if I didn't know who they were, I would just accept the request or decline it. In this case, I didn't know who this person was, so I declined him. Just then, I received another notification on my phone from Facebook. It was the same username, and he sent me a direct message. It read something along the lines of, "Hey, you're really pretty. Would you like to chat?" I responded telling him that I didn't know who he was and apologized. Keep in mind, this guy looked to be about 40 and I was 18 at the time, so this was starting to become very creepy. My friends eventually wanted to see what I was up to, and so I showed them the chat. Two of my friends really didn't care, and the others said to just block him. I felt like blocking him wouldn't be the right thing to do at the time, so I just left it alone. When I got home, I received another notification on my phone from the same guy. He said that we will get to know each other and that we would start a, quote, romantic relationship. I was beyond creeped out at this point, and so I blocked him and thought it was over. I'd say not even 10 minutes later, I received another message from Facebook, but with a different username. It read, "Why did you block me? I want to get to know you." I told him to leave me alone, and that he was way too older than me, and that if he didn't stop, that I would call the police and report him. He then started using profanity and making threats, and that he was going to find me and kill me. I blocked him once again and called the cops, but of course they couldn't do anything since he really didn't commit a crime. I find that BS, but whatever. His account was also taken down, and even if the police could track him, I couldn't remember his username. About a week or so went by, and I was starting to forget about what happened. I just wanted to graduate high school and be done. But a few days later, I was home alone in my room on my computer when I heard my dogs barking at something. I went to go see what they were barking at. They were barking at something outside of the sliding glass door, but I couldn't see anything since it was dark out there. I looked a bit harder, and I could see someone standing in our yard, looking straight at me. He then took off running, and I never saw him again. I have no idea if whoever that was the person on Facebook, but I believe that it might have been.
For the longest time, I was looking for a specific Funko Pop from a limited Marvel series that had come out. I've been collecting them ever since I was with my ex-boyfriend, who actually got me into comic books. And even though we had a pretty nasty breakup, I still wanted to complete my collection and continue to love everything Marvel and DC. Well, after about 3 years of looking for the final pop that I needed for my collection, I saw that someone named Aaron had listed it for sale on the Facebook Marketplace. After exchanging a couple messages, we both figured out a good time to meet, which ended up being around 8 p.m. the following night. The two of us agreed to meet at the mall because Aaron claimed to have some clothes shopping to do, and I actually needed to pick up my younger brother from his job at the pretzel stand, so it worked out. When the time came, I pulled into the mall parking lot at the entrance closest to the JCPenney, which was where we agreed to meet. And before I even made it to an empty parking spot, I recognized my ex's car. James loved his red Miata, and we took so many pictures of it that I could pick it out from a lineup. I decided that I didn't want to deal with him, so I ended up driving over to the movie theater parking lot and sending Aaron a message letting him know I was there. However, about 2 minutes after I sent the message, I noticed that Aaron had seen it, but not replied, and before I could send him another message to make sure that he actually saw it, I saw James in my rearview mirror walking toward my car. I'm glad the car was locked, because as he walked up to my door, he tried to open it. When he realized he couldn't, he began yelling through the window asking me to just hear him out. I ignored him and pulled out my phone to message Aaron and my brother to let them know what was happening. But when he saw Aaron's name on my phone, James said something that surprised me. "He's not coming, you know," he said. I looked up at him, confused as to why he would say something like that. That was when he let me know that he was James and created the account and the marketplace post because I had been ignoring him. I immediately began to freak out and began texting my brother, letting him know that I would meet him in a different parking lot. There was no way I was getting out of the car at that point. But the more I ignored James to text my brother, the angrier he got. And eventually he got so mad that he began smacking my window to get my attention. I turned my car on, and as I put my car in reverse, James smacking turned to him punching, and I screamed as he began trying to break my window and yelling at me to stop. He kept yelling, "I just want to talk to you." But I had never seen him so angry. I pulled out as fast as I could in fear of my life and began driving around the mall wondering where I would be safe to pick up my brother. I was afraid that James was following me. Eventually, my brother texted me back and told me that he was standing outside of the entrance near the side of the mall and that I could swing by and pick him up. I liked this plan because I didn't have to actually park. I grabbed my brother and we began driving home. The entire time I was paranoid that James was following me. Thankfully, there was no sign of him after returning to my house. My father ended up messaging his parents and letting them know that if he stepped foot near me again, we would be filing a restraining order. That was the last time I heard from him, but I'll never forget the look on his face as he tried to break my window to get to me. I had just purchased a new car after finally saving up enough money, and since my driveway had limited space, I decided to sell the Hyundai that I used to drive. I tried asking around to see if any of my friends or family members might need a car, but when no one was offering to buy it, I decided to list it on the Facebook Marketplace. It was a 2003 Sonata with 140,000 miles. And based on what I saw similar cars going for on the site, I listed it for $4,000 or best offer. I was a little surprised at how long it took before someone finally messaged me about the car, but after about 2 weeks, I finally felt like I had a solid offer. I had to drop the asking price to $3,400, but when the guy messaged me, offered to pay cash, I decided to take the money rather than wait for a better offer. The man's name, according to Facebook, was Lucas, and after discussing it, he asked me if I would be able to meet him at a garage that he supposedly owned. He claimed to not have a working vehicle at the moment and was hoping I would be able to drop the car off. And not thinking anything of it, I checked to see how far the garage was from my house and asked my friend if he would follow me in his car and drive me home after I made the sale. My buddy Jeremy said that it wouldn't be a problem, and when the time came, I drove over to Jeremy's house so that he could follow behind me till we got to the garage. The route to the garage was mostly highway for the first 15 or so minutes of the drive, and then we had to take the side roads for another 5 minutes before the GPS told me that I had reached my destination. I could see the garage, but in my rear view, there was no sign of Jeremy. I figured that I must have lost him at the light or something, but considering I put the address into his phone, I figured he would be there shortly. I planned on waiting in the car until he got there, but before I could message Lucas to let him know what was going on, I could see 3 men coming out from the side of the garage. I tried to see if any of them looked like Lucas's profile picture, but as far as I could tell, he wasn't there. I hoped that they just happened to be walking in the direction of my car and were just going to pass me. Sadly, that's not what happened. As the 3 men got closer to my car, I could tell that they were heading right for me. I smiled and nodded, thinking that maybe they just wanted to know who I was and why I was there. But before I could even begin rolling down my window, the man closest to me pulled a gun out of his waistband and pointed it in my direction. My hands instinctively left the steering wheel and went up in the air as I hoped and prayed for him not to pull the trigger. His 2 friends approached my door and opened it with ease as I didn't have the chance to lock it. And before I knew it, I was on the ground. I tried not to make any sudden moves as the men loaded into my car, and within a second, they were pulling away. It all happened in under a minute, and I was in absolute shock. On one hand, I was glad to be alive, but on the other, I was still really confused about what just happened to me. I got up off the ground and looked down the road to see if Jeremy had caught up yet, but there was no sign of his car. I walked over to the garage and looked inside, and that was when I realized that I had been conned from the beginning. Through a window, I could see that the garage had been abandoned for God knows how long, and before I even pulled out my phone to check, I knew that Lucas had used a fake profile. I opened up Facebook and tried to find his profile only to discover that his account had been deleted, even though it was active right before I pulled up to the garage. I called the police while I waited for Jeremy to arrive and reported the car stolen. Jeremy eventually showed up, and the two of us got out of there as fast as we could. Every now and then, I wonder what happened with that car, but as far as I know, the police never found it. All I know is I'll never use Facebook to sell something like that again.
My name is Jamie. A few years ago, several strange things started happening. It all began around Facebook. I logged into my account one day to find a new message from somebody. I used Facebook pretty regularly at the time, and I had for years. Over all the time that I had a Facebook, I received hundreds of friend requests. I certainly didn't know many of the people on my friends list. I would probably get about 5 to 10 friend requests per week on average, and most of the time I would just accept them. The message that I had received looked like spam. It was like multiple links, and those links were really long. There was no text to go along with the links, and I didn't open them. It was sent from some guy with no profile picture. I figured that he was some spam account, and I accidentally accepted a friend request from him or something in the past. I deleted the conversation and unfriended the guy, but only the next day, I got a very similar message. It was from another user. This time, the user did have a profile picture, but it was really generic. I think it was just a logo of a sports team. This person had also sent some random links. By now, I was suspecting that there was some type of Facebook hack going around, and spam messages were being sent. I just deleted them and went on, but they didn't stop. The next day, I had spam messages from multiple accounts. I was wondering what was going on. Then, the day after that is when things got even weirder and took a creepy twist. I saw that I had a friend request, and when I looked at it, the username was Jamie Smith Sucks. Jamie Smith is actually my real name, and I also got a friend request with somebody with the username Jamie Smith is an idiot. I clicked on these profiles, and they looked like they had just been created. Somebody was seemingly trying to mess with me. I didn't know who, and I didn't know why. Obviously, I declined those goofy friend requests, and I decided that I would not go on Facebook for a few days. I deleted the app from my phone, and I didn't go on it through my laptop either, but I couldn't escape the strange things. The next day or two went by fine, but then, one night at about midnight, there was a knock on my front door. I lived by myself in an apartment, and I walked over to the door wondering who would be there so late. No one was there when I looked. The next day, this happened again. A knocking at my door, but nobody was there when I looked outside. The day after that, I left my place to find that there was a picture on the floor right in front of my door. The picture was my Facebook profile pic, and it appeared as though somebody had just printed it off on a piece of paper. This was really starting to concern me, but I had no idea what could be done about it. The last straw was the next day. It was 11 o'clock at night, and I was home in my apartment. There was once again another knocking at my front door. Immediately following the knock, I heard that the knob to the door was turned. Luckily, the door was in fact locked. I walked over and looked out. No one was there again. I opened up the door, and on the ground was at least 100 pieces of paper with my profile picture printed on them. They were all stacked in a pile. I took them all and went to the police the next day. I told them everything and made a report. Beyond that, there wasn't much that I could do. But surprisingly, After I went to the police, everything just stopped. There was no more knocks at my door, no more things left outside, and no more weird Facebook messages or friend requests. I still don't know who did that to me, though. This happened many years ago in 2013. I used Facebook quite a bit back then, but I don't really use it at all anymore. On a daily basis, I would use the Facebook app on my phone and had the Messenger app as well. I talked to several of my friends that way, and when this happened, I was about 19 years old. I had probably upwards of 500 friends on there, which is a lot of people, but I've seen accounts with thousands. Anyways, I got a friend request from a girl named Veronica. I saw that we had about 5 mutual friends, and based on her picture, she looked nice. I looked at her profile page, but there wasn't much there. Just her age, which was also 19, and she had 2 pictures, and I saw that she had about 200 friends. After skimming over her page, I didn't actually know who she was, but I accepted the friend request. Our mutual friends were some people who I had gone to high school with, but didn't really know all that well as one other person who I didn't go to high school with, but lived in the general area. Not too long after I accepted her request, she sent me a message. I went to the Messenger app and I started talking with her. She was really cool and we hit it off. We talked for probably about a week before we wanted to meet up. I knew that she lived in the area, but I didn't know exactly where. Veronica suggested that we meet at a local mall, and there was a really popular shopping center about 10 minutes from my house. We decided to meet that Saturday at 11 a.m. In the meantime, we kept talking quite a bit, just like usual. When it was Saturday, I drove to the mall and went inside. It was pretty busy with it being a weekend. I had let Veronica know when I was leaving, and I think she left at around the same time as me. When I got inside, I messaged her that I was there, but that's when she stopped replying to me initially. At first, she told me that she was inside the mall and would look for me, but after that, I told her where I was and she didn't go there. I was standing in the food court for like 10 minutes and didn't see any sign of her. I reached out to her again, but did not get a response. I did see that she had seen my message though. When she didn't show up for another 5 minutes, I decided to walk around the mall looking for her. I figured that maybe the signal on her phone was bad or something, or maybe she had put her phone in her pocket with our conversation still open. I was just telling myself things like that, but I started to get a bad feeling. The mall was pretty big. It wasn't like the Mall of America or anything, but it was a decent size, and it did have 2 levels. There were also a lot of people there, so it would be tough, but not impossible to find someone. At one point though, when I was looking around, I did see this one guy who kind of looked like he was staring at me from afar. When I walked all around the mall, I saw the guy again, but he was walking a ways back behind me. I walked around for maybe 20 minutes. I really wanted to meet Veronica, but the more I walked around, the more I felt like she wasn't actually there. Then, finally, I felt my phone vibrate. I looked, and Veronica had sent me a message. She said, "Come to the entrance by the food court." That was the first area that I had been, and I had told her when I was there. I walked back over to it, which took me about 2 or 3 minutes. When I got back there, I looked around. It was still crowded, but I didn't see Veronica. I was a good ways away from the entrance doors, and I started to walk over to them. But that's when I noticed that the same guy that I had seen multiple times before was right there. He was standing right by the entrance and kind of looking around. Then, when he made eye contact with me for a brief moment, he walked behind one of the doors. I started to get suspicious, and I decided that I was just going to leave, but I was going to leave in a different door than that one. I began walking in the opposite direction. When I did, I noticed the guy then start to walk through the food court towards me. I picked up the pace and turned a corner to another hallway. I walked quickly and did make it to the exit. I didn't see the man behind me when I made it there. After that, I walked around the mall on the outside until I made it to the parking lot that I had parked in. Then I drove home. By the time I was home, I looked and saw that I had a message from Veronica. The message said, "Why didn't you come to the food court entrance like I asked? Why did you just leave?" By this time, I knew that Veronica likely didn't exist, and the one guy that I saw was running the account. I asked her to send me a picture of herself right now. Then she blocked me. That pretty much confirmed my suspicions. I was disappointed, obviously, but I also felt good that I wasn't a victim to anything further than being catfished. From that point forward, I was much more careful with who I talked to online.
A little while ago, I saw an ad on Facebook Marketplace where a woman claimed to be giving away free gerbils. Apparently, the boy-girl pair she owned had produced a huge litter of little gerbil babies, and since there was way too much for her to handle, she was just going to give them away to a handful of loving homes. The ad didn't include the grim little factoid that the gerbil mom would probably eat her babies if she didn't think she could take care of them, but I figured, so I got in touch. The woman turned out to be a widow who had originally bought the gerbils to keep her company. I did think it was kind of unusual that she didn't just get herself a cat or dog if loneliness was the issue, but hey, different strokes for different folks, right? I'm not one to judge. And she seemed so sweet when I called her to arrange a date and time to go pick up 2 of the gerbils. Needless to say, I did not expect her to be living in the conditions she was, because when me and my dad arrived at her home with a little straw-bedded cage to take the gerbils home in, the whole exchange took a turn for the worse. So we called over at the gerbil lady's place, and at first there was no reply. Then when she finally answers the door, we can see she's in quite a sorry state. One of her eyes is swollen and bloodshot, with some super gross-looking yellow gunk collecting in the corner of the eye. But we remain polite and just ignore it. The last thing me and Dad wanted to do was offend or upset the lady by pointing out what was an already obvious medical condition. But when she invites us inside, we get a clue as to how she got sick in the first place. Her little house reeked like it was the single worst stench that ever graced my nostrils, and there were gerbils everywhere. And I mean everywhere. And much like their owner, they were not in good condition. Just from the gerbils that were skittering around the kitchen, I could see that many of them were missing fur and patches, or had painful-looking growths around their legs or backs. Then when she invited us into her TV room for a cup of tea, we could see it was even worse in there. We had to make up some excuse about how we couldn't stay for long after me and my dad shot each other a telepathic look that basically said a giant nope. And with the amount of gerbil poop that clogged up every little corner and skirting board, it was absolutely no wonder that she had some kind of infection. And when I caught sight of an actual tiny rodent skeleton behind one of her curtains, I went into full improv mode to get us out of there. I turned to my dad, named some piece of important gerbil habitat that we hadn't picked up from the store yet, wink wink, but then agreed that, oh, we can't possibly bring home the gerbils without insert name of doodad here, and we'll have to call by again in a couple of days. I remember us both sitting in the car afterward, just kind of in shock at what we'd just seen. The fact that someone could live like that was just depressing and terrifying to me. She obviously had no one coming to check on her, and anyone who thought it was okay to keep a home like that must have been losing their marbles. It sucked having to make a decision like we did. I felt really mean basically snitching, but we just had to call animal rescue, for her benefit more than anything else. The ASPCA rep we spoke to said that they'd investigate and let us know what their call was going to be, and in the end, they got back in touch, thanking us for the tip. Not only was the gerbil lady now in touch with a local charity that would help check up on her in her twilight years, but her house was considerably cleaner and safer after they've cleared out almost 100 gerbils from her property. They said the situation was so bad that the only thing that kept the infestation from spreading were the neighborhood cats. I did remember seeing a bunch of strays hanging around outside, but I figured it was just because she was the local animal lover who would routinely feed them treats or whatever. Turns out she was breeding treats for them, just not in the way she might like to think. The creepiest thing about it was that, from standing outside her home, you'd never have guessed at the horror show waiting for you on the inside. And the whole thing just reminds me that we don't really know what's going on behind closed doors, even the ones closest to us. Behind the facade of normalcy, we have no idea what our friends and neighbors are up to, or what nightmarish conditions they're living under.